Hi friends, welcome to the last video in this series of B101. We are looking to analyze compensation in Article 11. Article 12 is super short, special terms and conditions. In Article 13, scope of the agreement, it's not a lot, so let's get it done. Article 11, compensation. 11.1. For the architect's basic services described under Article 3, the owner shall compensate the architect as follows. Stipulated sum, percentage basis. It's a percent of the owner's budget for the cost of work as calculated in accordance with Section 11.6 or other. So I hope by now you know what stipulated sum and percentage basis mean. If you don't know, stipulated sum is kind of, you say, hey, I'm an architect, I'm gonna design this house for, I don't know, $50,000. And you commit to that sum, and you can plan that designing this house will take you, I don't know, I'm guessing like 200 hours for $50K. But then things go wrong and it turns out that you need to invest 500 hours. Well, that's too bad because you put 50K here. So that kind of binds you. So the stipulated sum is more appropriate for projects that are low risk, that you feel very comfortable doing, that you have a lot of experience in, and that are of kind of manageable size. Then percentage basis, this, and it explains here as a percent, so you put percentage value, not the sum. Is a percent of the owner's budget for the cost of the work as calculated in accordance with Section 11.6. So, and you can see cost of the work is like both words are capitalized. So in A201 there is a definition of these essentially. But what this percentage basis means is that you can say, I'm going to charge you, owner, 6% of the cost of the work. And then that can be whichever amount it ends up being. And then when you sign a contract with that's percent, like where compensation is percentage basis, then certainly it works in your favor if the project ends up being more expensive. But just like everything here, it all kind of has its ups and downs, and there is a lot of leap of faith that all parties in the design bid build situation take. So this percentage basis is kind of, how would I say this? It's a, I guess I would say it's the least of all evils for all the parties. Okay, 11.2. For the architect's supplemental services designated in Section 4.1.1 and for any sustainability services required pursuant to Section 4.1.3, the owner shall compensate the architect as follows. Insert amount of or basis of compensation. If necessary, list specific services to which particular methods of compensation apply. So you can see that supplemental services and sustainability services are paid separately. 11.3. For additional services that may arise during the course of the project, including those under Section 4.2, the owner shall compensate the architect as follows. Insert amount of or basis of compensation. So this means that at this point in time, so before any construction has commenced or any design has commenced, the owner is setting up a little pot of money for additional services that may arise during the course of the project. Certainly, if you exceed the amount of money that's in that pot, you need to certainly talk to the owner, or in whichever case, when it comes to additional services that arise during the course of the project, you need the owner's written approval. We saw that earlier. 11.4. Compensation for supplemental and additional services of the architect's consultants when not included in section 11.2 or 11.3 shall be the amount invoiced to the architect plus a certain percent, or as follows. Insert amount of or basis for computing architect's consultants compensation for supplemental or additional services. So usually whatever the owner pays to the architect is responsible to pay architect's consultants. In this paragraph, we're seeing a scenario where architect's consultants are not included in 11.2 or 11.3, which are supplemental and additional services. Then the amount will be invoiced to the architect plus a certain percentage. Okay. 11. Do I have anything else to say about this? Maybe not. 11.5. When compensation for basic services is based on a stipulated sum or percentage basis, the proportion of compensation for each phase of services shall be as follows. Schematic design phase, blank percent. Design development phase, blank percent. Construction documents, blank percent. Procurement phase, this is a bidding, blank percent. And construction phase, blank percent. Total basic compensation, 100%. I would recommend remembering where in the contract this table is, because if you get a case study with this contract and you need to look up this information really quick, remember that it's towards the end of the contract. Now when it comes to these numbers here, different sources tell you different things. I don't really think that the exam will ask you per se, but yeah, it's kind of tricky for me to kind of give you specific numbers for each of these, because I know the resources give you all sorts of numbers there, and certainly this distribution of moolah will depend whether you are a design architect or architect of record. Probably you will be the architect of record, and in that case your schematic design development will be a little leaner, and construction documents and CA will be heavier. But I certainly encourage you to have a good understanding of how the fee is distributed. But I mean, instead of giving you specific numbers, I can tell you that from this list, construction documents are going to be the heaviest of all these. Then it's going to be design development phase. Then it's going to be somewhere these schematic design phase and construction phase might be around the same percentage. And then procurement phase should be the smallest. Usually is 5% of the overall fee. So yeah, have a good understanding of like how they relate to each other. So you don't necessarily need to know exact numbers, but know that CDs will take the most amount of fee and time, certainly. Okay, and also the rest of these. 11.6. When compensation identified in section 11.1 is on a percentage basis, progress payments for each phase of basic services shall be calculated by multiplying the percentages identified in this article by the owner's most recent budget for the cost of the work. Compensation paid in previous progress payments shall not be adjusted based on subsequent updates to the owner's budget for the cost of the work. Okay. 11.6.1. When compensation is on a percentage basis and any portions of the project are deleted or otherwise not constructed, compensation for those portions of the project shall be payable to the extent services are performed on those portions. The architect shall be entitled to compensation in accordance with this agreement for all services performed, whether or not in the construction phase is commenced. So, yeah, these two agreements are, in a sense, similar. But this one says that if a portion of the project gets deleted, I mean, we mentioned it previously that if you sign a percentage basis compensation, it's in architect's best interest to have a more expensive project. But here it says that if part of the project is deleted or otherwise not constructed, the architect will be paid for those portions to the extent services are performed on those portions. So you can be designing, I don't know, like let's say 4 towers throughout DD, and you come to the CDs and the owner says, well, I'm just gonna, no, but sorry, let's say it like this. So you do 4 towers throughout 40% completion of CDs, and the owner says, well, I don't have enough money, I'm just gonna do 3 towers. But then, sure, you ultimately will be, your percentage-based sum will be based on 3 towers, but up until that point in time, you will be paid as if you were doing 4 towers. I hope that makes sense. 11.7, the hourly billing rates for services of the architect and architect's consultants are set forth below. The rates shall be adjusted in accordance with the architect's and architect's consultants' normal review practices. If applicable, attach an exhibit of hourly billing rates or insert them below. Employee or category, rate, number of dollars. So this is another important thing to remember, that it's located towards the end of the agreement, because you may get this on the exam in the case studies or something, where you will have to find how much an employee costs per hour, or whichever rate the architect is using. So this here says that you as an architect have to list all the people that are going to be working on this project and say how much you charge for them. Okay. 11.8 compensation for reimbursable expenses. 11.8.1 reimbursable expenses are in addition to compensation for basic, supplemental, and additional services, and include expenses incurred by the architect and the architect's consultants directly related to the project as follows. Sorry. Point 1. Transportation and authorized out-of-town travel and subsistence. Point 2. Long-distance services, dedicated data and communication services, teleconferences, project websites, and extranets. I don't know what extranets is. Sorry. Point 3. Permitting and other fees required by authorities having jurisdiction over the project. Point 4. Printing, reproductions, plots, and standard form documents. Point 5. Postage, handling, and delivery. Point 6. Expense of overtime work, requiring higher than regular rates if authorized in advance by the owner. Point 6. Expense of... I read this already. Point 7. Renderings, physical models, mock-ups, professional photography, and presentation materials requested by the owner or required for the project. Point 8. If required by the owner and with the owner's prior written approval, the architect's consultant's expenses of professional liability insurance dedicated exclusively to this project, or the expense of additional insurance coverage or limits in excess of that normally maintained by the architect's consultants. Point 9. All taxes levied on professional services and on reimbursable expenses. Point 10. Site office expenses. Point 11. Registration fees and any other fees charged by the certifying authority or by other entities as necessary to achieve the sustainable objective. And point 12. Other similar project-related expenditures. So there's no point of learning all this by heart, but having a general sense of what is going to be a reimbursable item is pretty strong. I don't know, for some reason, whenever I see people talking about these, out of all the 12, they tend to remember this point 4 the most, like printing, reproduction, plots, and standard form documents. I mean, some of them that I find kind of interesting are these overtime work and renderings, physical models, mock-ups requested by the owner. Yeah. Okay. 11.8.2. For reimbursable expenses, the compensation shall be the expenses incurred by the architect and the architect consultant, plus a certain percent of the expenses incurred. So the reason for this is, let's say you are the architect, and I'm going to use now the printing example, and you have to plot 20 sheets and you pay I don't know, $200 for them. And if the owner just gives you $200 back, that's not quite fair, because you kind of took your time off the project, like outside of your working time, and you went to the printing shop to print these sheets. So you need to be compensated for your own work. And that's why this little percentage gets added onto whatever your receipt says. 11.9. Architect's insurance. If the types and limits of coverage required in section 2.5 are in addition to the types and limits the architect normally maintains, the owner shall pay the architect for the additional costs incurred by the architect for the additional coverages as set forth below. Insert the additional coverages the architect is required to obtain in order to satisfy the requirements set forth in section 2.5 and for which the owner shall reimburse the architect. So, as we had said, the owner can require architect to purchase more insurance for the project for whichever reason. And the architect will do that, and the owner will certainly pay for that, and a little bit more for this percentage. Okay, 11.10, payments to the architect. 11.10.1, initial payments. 11.10.1.1, an initial payment of bloop dollars shall be made upon execution of this agreement and is the minimum payment under this agreement. It shall be credited to the owner's account in the final invoice. So if you're an architect, you sign this agreement and you walk away with, I don't know, $100, and you can feel happy. I'm sorry, I'm being a little silly here. 11.10.1.2. If a sustainability certification is part of the sustainable objective, an initial payment to the architect of dollars shall be made upon execution of this agreement for registration fees and other fees payable to the certifying authority and necessary to achieve the sustainability certification. The architect's payments to the certifying authority shall be credited to the owner's account at the time the expense is incurred. Pretty straightforward. Okay, 11.10.2, progress payments. 11.10.2.1, unless otherwise agreed, payments for services shall be made monthly in proportion to services performed. Payments are due and payable upon presentation of the architect's invoice. Amounts unpaid, let's say 30 days, bloop days, after the invoice shall bear interest at the rate entered below, or in the absence thereof at the legal rate prevailing from time to time at the principal place of the business of the architect. Insert rate of monthly or annual interest agreed upon. So I think AHPP says somewhere, there is a quote that says, if your owner is late 2 months with their payment, you're basically lending them money for free. So this little paragraph says that if the owner doesn't pay you on time, whatever they owe you gains interest, and then whenever they do get to pay you, they will pay you a little more than what they originally owed you. Seems fair, right? It does. 11.10.2.2. The owner shall not withhold amounts from the architect's compensation to impose a penalty or liquidated damages on the architect, or to offset sums requested by or paid to contractors for the cost of changes in the work, unless the architect agrees or has been found liable for the amounts in a binding dispute resolution proceeding. So this is something that's this part of the relationship between owner and architect is very different from the relationship between owner and contractor, because with the contractor, the owner can definitely withhold amounts for work that hasn't been done. But here it says it shall not, and shall is a pretty strong word. And it says, yeah, unless the architect agrees or has been found liable for the amounts in binding dispute resolution proceeding. Makes sense. 11.10.2.3, records of reimbursable expenses, expenses pertaining to supplemental and additional services, and services performed on the basis of hourly rates shall be available to the owner at mutually convenient times. So yeah, if the owner wants to take a look at what's going on with with these expenses for reimbursable, supplemental, and additional services, he or she should be able to look into that. Okay, so this concluded the Article 11 that spoke about compensation. There are things that are fairly important here to know, but it's not a lot. But yeah, again, I would like to emphasize that you know what these capitalized terms mean. That's really important. And know the distribution of money between the phases and know how employees get charged for their work, how you charge the owner for the employee's work. Now comes the shortest article, is Article 12, Special Terms and Conditions. Special terms and conditions that modify this agreement are as follows. Include other terms and conditions applicable to this agreement. So it can be anything. It could be exhibits or anything that would modify something from this agreement. And we saw it earlier that if something in this agreement, like if one piece is rendered invalid, that does not invalidate the entire agreement. And I think we finally arrived to the last article, scope of the agreement. 13.1. This agreement represents the entire and integrated agreement between the owner and the architect and supersedes all prior negotiations, representations, or agreements ever written or oral. This agreement may be amended only by written instruments signed by both the owner and architect. Pretty straightforward. This paragraph says this agreement is the main thing that you abide by. 13.2. This agreement is comprised of the following documents identified below. AIA document B101 2017 standard form agreement between owner and architect. That's this. Point 2, AIA document E203 2013 building information modeling and digital data exhibit dated as indicated below. Do look into this agreement. It's not very long. Point 3, exhibits. Check the appropriate box for any exhibits incorporated into this agreement. AIA document E204 2017 sustainable projects exhibit dated as indicated below. Look into this one. Or other exhibits incorporated into this agreement. Clearly identify any other exhibits incorporated into this agreement, including any exhibits and scopes of services identified as exhibits in section 4.1.2. Point 4, other documents. List other documents, if any, forming part of the agreement. And these other documents could be a lot of things. Could be deeds, could be all sorts of stuff. And then, is that it? Yeah, this agreement entered into as of the day and year first written above, and then you as owner sign it, printed name and title, and architect signature, printed name, title, and license number if required. Right here. So that brings us to the conclusion of this series. I hope you found this helpful. I know when I was studying contracts, it was so daunting to just start reading them and trying to make something out of what each of these paragraphs say, which can seem pretty dry if you're just starting, but I cannot overemphasize the importance of practice questions. and talking to people, because practice questions bring these scenarios into place where what you read in the contract can be applied onto a situation, and basically you need to be a judge of how a scenario should be resolved based on what these contracts say. So again, I hope this was helpful to you. I wanted to create something that the old me when I was studying contracts would find it helpful. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please let me know. My email should be down below. And yeah, I think that's it. I wish you best of luck in your studying, and best of luck in AREs and your life. Take care.